This is Thrive Perspectives, an ever-growing discussion about the issues and ideas that shape our lives, with your guide, Dr. Matthew Jacoby.
Welcome, listeners. Great to have you with us. My name's Stu, your host for Thrive Perspectives. When you hear the phrase sharing your faith, what comes to mind? For a lot of us, it's pressure, awkwardness, or feeling like we're just not good enough. But what if sharing your faith isn't about pressure at all? What if it's about honesty, love, being yourself? When we hear someone challenge us to be an evangelist, many of us immediately picture street preaching or awkward conversations or a pressure cooker expectation to win souls. Now let's join Matt and Connell where we discover that the biblical imperative is both broader and more grounded than that, and honestly, far more human. Good morning, Matt. Good morning, Connell.
Morning, lads.
Thrive Perspectives, and really looking forward to this conversation, actually, because when I hear someone say to me, you need to share your faith or be an evangelist, I guess many of us sort of immediately picture street preaching or awkward conversations or pressure cooker kind of expectations on us achieving something to win souls. And great to have a chat about what we really mean when we talk about, or what Scripture really means when it talks about sharing our faith. Of course, we've got the Great Commission of Jesus in Matthew 28, but there's lots of other references which we'll come to, I'm sure, through this discussion today.
You're absolutely right, mate. I'm sure that most people, I can think of so many times in church where it's like, share your faith, share your faith. What are you ashamed of Jesus? Or, like share the gospel. And they think, what? How do I slip Jesus into an I mean, probably first of all, it's fear. Oh my goodness, feeling and then feeling because they're slightly overwhelmed and then just feeling guilty. And all of that is a recipe for clamming up and doing nothing. If we can help to break that down, I think my own personal journey was a realization that this is so easy and natural. And if it's not easy and natural, it almost creates the opposite effect. I mean, it doesn't really work anyway.
Totally. I think we've all probably, the three of us anyway, been there. I mean, I remember walking through shopping centres with a tract and walking into stores and talking to the guy behind the counter saying, have you got a couple of minutes? I'd love to talk to you about something. And the interesting thing is I never got an aggressive, maybe I was lucky, an aggressive response. I mean, I never got a super positive response either, but I kind of had this interpretation. My job's just to sow the seed and, and then walk away and never see the guy again, the guy in the Optus shop or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I felt like I was ticking a box. I realized I felt like I was ticking a box. I was doing what I felt like I was expected to do. And I think this is where this discussion is important.
I've been a big box ticker too, Stu. And, I can remember too this being an achievement thing, and the more I stepped over that line, and it was like a sense of achievement, like I've just done a high dive or something.
Well, I think for me, as I analysed it in hindsight, it was like I realised I was actually using it to affirm what I believed. Yeah, I do believe this. It was almost like I needed that to kind of affirm, I'm sure I know what I believe because I've talked to so many people about it now.
It gives you a sense that you're doing something.
Yes.
Like you're actively engaged in the mission. I've done it. I've done my bit. I've ticked that box. But interesting in those scenarios, there's not a lot of cost because you get to walk away. And it doesn't matter if that person thinks you're weird as a result of it or what they thought of that interaction. The fact that you're never going to see them again.
I can tell you the cost of actually getting to the point of walking up
to do it. But in contrast to sharing your faith with people who
in relationship,
who you're friends with or your family at work with, and that you have your career invested in
relationships.
There's a big cost to pay that I think makes that extra difficult.
Yeah, that's a good point because the relationships are ongoing, and so if it colours their view of you, or it's we like to sort of curate our identity in those contexts, and it creates a bit of a safety zone for us, and essentially it does somewhat put that put that in danger.
So just on that, before you move on, because I think there's a really good point in that. No, this is not having a crack at any churches out there. I remember being part of a church that had a very big playgroup ministry, like 100 people, families coming from community, not in the church. And it was all about, we want to try to build relationship with them to share the gospel. But it got to exactly the point you're making, where the relationships had been built so strongly that now the church people who were working in that playgroup ministry, with the idea that it was to help them understand who God was, didn't want to sacrifice, or were afraid of losing the relationship by actually starting that conversation. And so the whole thing became quite counterproductive.
Yeah. Which is why it's good to talk about what does it mean to start that conversation.
Yeah, it's great.
Because in a way, the way that you picture it is like some slightly artificial.
No, that's right.
You know, like you're presenting a pyramid marketing.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm waiting for the moment, when can I get this in?
Yeah.
And then it sounds a little bit like a pyramid marketing
because
sort of, pitch.
It is, though, when you look at any of the...
Well, it shouldn't be. What do you mean it is?
It is, but that's how it's presented. Even when we talk about, you know, if you go into your workplace, you're on the mission field and
you mean that's how it sounds?
Well, it can become that too. Like it kind of, it becomes like...
But I think we want to say it shouldn't be.
No, it shouldn't.
No, it shouldn't be, but it often, I think we feel like it is. And even when I've read stuff on this before in the past, it talks about, you know, build relationships with people, make friends with people, to create those opportunities, have those conversations. And to me, that just makes my skin crawl, because it's just like, that's just like Amway. It's
People
like,
are not projects.
They're not, I'm building relationships purely to create the opportunity to have this conversation, be able to speak into that. And I think there's nuance to that, but I think a lot of people, when in the mission field, that view of it is they're doing things like establishing relationships, befriending people and so on for the sake of the opportunity to speak into their lives.
So,
like
you know, what, like the opposite to that problem could be that you say, but you know, relationships are an end in themselves. We've got to love people, and which is all true, absolutely true. I mean, love is not a means to an end. Love is the most important thing, but it could easily lead to then what you're saying, Stu, is that you build relationships and you put, you know, it's all about but then you become almost dependent on those relationships in a way that you're not willing to completely be yourself. I mean, I think the best sort of relationships are relationships in which we can completely be ourselves. Yeah. You know, there's something problematic about feeling like I need to withhold probably the most important part of myself from this relationship. I think right from the start, there's actually a problem with the relationship. It's not about you. It's about your ability to relate openly with another person.
So I think it's about you and the relationship, but I think it's also about how much we believe what we believe. Because at the end of the day, if I knew that I could give Connell a pill that would make him live forever, I would be not afraid to nag with him. Mate, this is seriously, believe me, it's like the gold in the field. The guy goes and, you know, the parable.
Well, we do this all the time when if it's some kind of new diet or some kind of,
exactly.
I'm feeling so great.
We share it on Facebook.
Or some kind of supplement or some kind of, well, whatever. I mean, we're all very willing to to share. Well, someone recently, the friend of my daughter. This is a few years ago now, actually, and she'd read this book, The Secret, which is all about manifesting.
Yes.
And she was saying, "Oh, I've read this book," and she was so evangelistic about it because she was so enthusiastic about, like I've been practicing this and, it's really,
it seems to work.
Unlocked all of this stuff and I'll get you a copy. And I drove away thinking, man, if the average Christian was as enthusiastic about their faith as this woman was about this, whatever,
I'll tell you what the problem is though, and this is what I think, because I see it in myself, having worked in secular environments all of my life. I always feel like I'm in the lion's den. For some reason, I've always worked for organizations where they're all militant atheists, or they're
maybe it's you, Connell,
or they're either militant atheists, completely indifferent, or there's been maybe one or two Christians, and those Christians have all been weird. Come across weird, like judgmental almost, as if they kind of like, they're not relatable. They're not people that other people wanted to be with. I think there's a lot of Christians too who don't speak up, but the ones that do speak up and make a lot of noise about it are almost doing what they're doing, what we talked about before. We're trying to sort of tick a box. And it's not coming from a place that people kind
authenticity.
of just connecting what you said. It's the fear of what people. It's kind of cool to believe in the secret and manifesting because it's kind of a contemporary idea, and it's got this contemporary spirituality about it where by just embracing those ideas, it's kind of like people might think, oh, it's a bit of a strange idea, or I'm not really into that spiritual stuff. But people already have preconceived ideas of what it means to be a Christian and what going to church means.
Yeah.
So
we're starting from deficit in the sense.
Yeah,
what you're saying.
There is a sense of kind of like people have an opinion of what that means to be a Christian. Some of the atheists that I've worked with, they really dislike Christians because they've said that every Christian they've met, apart from me, is like really, really annoying and not a nice person. I think they were more vocal and saying, but you have met me. And actually, I know that they're friends with someone else. And I know that that person is a Christian. They're not close friends, so they're not really that close, but they've met them on a business context and go, that guy's a really great guy. And go, yeah, that guy's a Christian too. But you just didn't know that. And so they're coloured by the people that make the most noise. Yes. And so they form an opinion of them, and then they get this real negative vibe about Christianity.
Yeah, so in summary, then, there is a bit of a deficit. And part of what we have the opportunity to do is reverse that deficit. I mean, I think people can have 100 different bad experiences. I actually think it only takes one good experience to reverse. I mean, this is a bit of rudimentary logic. The only thing it takes, if you say all swans are white, it only takes one black swan to discredit, to contradict that statement, right? So all Christians are da-da-da-da-da, that stereotype. It only takes one good example for them to realize, oh, well, maybe I just haven't had good experiences. I think it's worth probably saying, I mean, some of that could just be well-meaning people out there
who are doing the best that they can do.
We don't want to judge what, I guess, the way that people come across. But we know even within ourselves, because we've done this too, that you can easily do things to tick a box. There's probably times in my life where maybe I've come across, as weird and, because being very achievement-oriented, wanting to tick boxes. And I can think of situations where it was very artificial and I did it more for me. And, I was the one making the noise. And who was that for? Was that so I get that. I mean, the other thing I think to be very careful of is, as Christians, I think we have to be very careful what else we stand for, because we can be,
good point.
We can be outwardly Christian, but, if we're going on about our political bandwagon or about some conspiracy theory that we've got, then people will associate that with our faith. Now, there are some people out there that want that to be associated with their faith. And I just have to say that can be so destructive. Like, we need to leave all of that other messaging out of it. However, we've talked about this in previous episodes with how there's a level of, that level of definiteness, and this is and almost frustration around that. So people can want to go out there with those messages, and that's a sure way to hijack your witness. So, but I think we get that.
But that's also, I think, when we say we're on mission, that can be an element that feeds into it, that we actually choose to remove ourselves from being, about those kind of issues. Like there might be causes or politics or things that we want to get involved in, but we choose not to be seen as the kind of voice for that when other people around us are, and we choose to sort of back away from those discussions in order to protect the most important.
Our witness. It's protecting our witness. Yeah. Because the moment you put your political rant up on your social media feed, you have just alienated half your friends.
Totally.
And hopefully
or half your acquaintances,
half your acquaintances, and hopefully you've got a broad range of. I think as Christians we should be in amongst, and we should be connecting people who think differently to us. So the moment you put your political rant up there on your social media feed, it's one of the most destructive things, right? Because you might think, oh no, but this is the truth, and is that the first thing that you want to say to your? Is that how? This is where I think we can damage our witness, because we come across with these particular things which make no sense to people. I mean, even if it's something that's true, like something about a moral conviction or something, I think we even have to be careful with that, because our moral convictions don't make sense outside of our worldview. And how are people going to receive our worldview unless they are drawn towards that transformative experience of Christ? So we have to stick to the central things about the transformative experience of Christ in our lives. When we stick to the central things, that's the stuff that's going to lead people to a transformation of worldview.
And to bring this back to Scripture, I think Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 calls all believers to be ambassadors of reconciliation. And so this chance to kind of build relationship without putting obstacles, as you just said, or borders, or let's leave the things that aren't the main thing out of those sort of conversations, so that we don't essentially disqualify our ability to talk to people. We need to be able to keep the conversation going.
I guess it's not to say you don't sort of engage in those kind of discussions like politics and so on, but just be careful. Is this going to be helpful or destructive in me? The real conversation, the most important one, is the one about, Jesus and the gospel, ultimately.
The only important one.
But is me being involved in this and putting this out there, does it diminish my capacity? There's a lot of stuff you can have an idea and you can vocalize it. People may agree or disagree, but there are hot topics, that you mention that or you're on that side, and it just, people immediately get hot under the collar with.
Well, here's a good start, and I think this is a good start to building a positive approach. The most important thing in any given circumstance is not what you're saying or what you think is true. It's actually your disposition is the most important thing. So even if you're discussing, there's a political discussion happening, right? What you say is less important than your disposition, So if you come in with hot-headed certainty, which is arrogance, I mean, honestly, with politics, such a complex, if you're not treading into that cautiously and with a sense of humility, what would I know? I think what you're exhibiting then is a disposition of humility where that's going to then contrast with the sense of certitude that you have about your experience of Christ, because that is the one thing that you have a first-hand. We have the thing that we have the closest relationship with, even more close. I mean, we're getting into epistemology here, which we've discussed before, but you have a closer experience of the Holy Spirit than you even have of the external world.
Yes.
Right? It's more immediate to you than any empirical truth, like outside you. That the trees are green or this is, I mean, because the Holy Spirit testifies to our spirit. Now, I know in our culture, we're taught not to recognize that as immediately as we recognize, empirical truths. But, this is where and we've talked about this before, if you're going on about this stuff with this sort of certainty, and then you start talking about your faith, it gets lost in the noise, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because actually there is a level of certainty that you can have. And it's not that we need to prove that, but I think it comes through, it will just come across in your disposition. And this is where the disposition is the most important thing. What I mean by that is, if we really love the Lord with our heart, mind, soul, and strength, I mean, this is the thing. That's the first thing, isn't it? Like, delight yourself in the Lord.
Totally.
Love the Lord your God with all your heart. If living this life is everything to you and you are so excited about what you're discovering and you just are hungry for the more of the joy of God, when you go into a circumstance, all you really need to be is just a little bit open about that. Of course, you can't just, because a lot of this is new to people, so you can't just lump all of it onto them in one, but allowing that to show, going in with that disposition, then you don't have to really prove it, but people see it in your life that you are glowing with this. They're seeing in your desire and your hunger and your joy, you're going to glow with that. I mean, here's an example just to move away. And I think what I want to move away is this fear of, I don't know what to say, or what if people ask me these questions and I don't think I convince, how do I get Jesus into the all of these things, right? Which we tend to, people might think, maybe, Matt, you might be good at that sort of thing, but I'm not very articulate and I wouldn't know how to explain this. And I met a woman, she was in her 40s, and she explained, she was telling a bit of her story, and she had a learning difficulty at school. And so she was quite simple-hearted sort of person. The opposite of intellectual, like you even sensed that, yes, here's a person with some learning difficulties, and she worked as doing deliveries, like food delivery sort of stuff, and, very low socioeconomic, no education. She would every time, and for a while there, I'd talk to her every couple of weeks, and she would always talk about all the people that she talked to about her faith, just constantly talking about it, because this woman was like,
it was everything to her.
It was everything. She lived on this, right? She talked about how she'd drive and she'd talk to God, and she's just like, and then she'd get out of the car and she'd keep talking about God. So she. And I sense, not in any unnatural way, for her, she didn't overthink it.
It's just who she was.
It's just who she was. And she talked about the people, their responses, and how she was journeying with people. And for her, it was all the most natural thing in the world.
Yeah.
And I thought, here is, it's one of those situations where, when Jesus came across them, he said, this, folks, everyone, look at this. This is what I'm talking about. Yeah. Right? It's the widow giving the little, giving everything she had. It's the woman that touches Jesus' robe. Yeah. It's the Syrophoenician woman that chases after Jesus. This is one of these moments for me where I thought, this is what it's all about. And so your disposition, allowing a level of openness to let out some light.
So I think, again, just coming back to a couple of scriptures on this, Acts 1:8, which, is the one about you will be my witnesses.
Yeah.
It's not you might be, it's not.
This is a good start to this conversation.
Some of you will be, but you will be. Bearing witness is actually about identity, not about information.
Yeah.
Not about, necessarily pushing anything. It's just about who you are. It's your identity. You will be a witness because if you've encountered Jesus, you can't help but be a witness by just the way you live. Yeah, if nothing else.
Exactly. Exactly. And the two key things is that you will be. So as we are more and more filled with God, with the Holy Spirit, with the joy and the peace of God, like lean into this, enjoy God. And essentially the next thing, then, witness, is about allowing that to show, allowing that joy to show. I often find it's useful for me to understand evangelism, which is a big, scary word, is actually more aligned with the repeated imperative in the Psalms to praise the Lord in all the earth.
Yes.
Now, to praise is to just rave about something that you've experienced, this is what people do when they find that new diet or supplement or this new technique or this new, they're just raving about how good it is, or you've seen a movie and, you've got to go see that. You've got to go see that movie. Oh, it's amazing. I'll go. I want to see it again. I'll go with you. They're essentially praising. That's, in a very ordinary sense, what praise is. And so allowing the joy and the enjoyment to come out. And I'm sure every Christian that's listening to this is listening to this because their faith is so important to them.
Yeah.
And it's just that what has often happened is that we've perhaps clammed up. We've we've pulled down the shutters to protect that, perhaps out of fear. And if we can maybe break that down a little bit, that it's actually not about you having to say the right things or explain it the right way. It's not about quantity. It's not about ticking a box. So you can notch, I've talked to all of these people. It's not about feeling bad that, I didn't slip Jesus into a conversation today. I think if you pray about this and you're willing, what I've discovered, this is the easy bit actually. What I've discovered is that if I have the disposition, I'm passionate about this, the enjoyment of my faith, and then a disposition to want to be open about that.
Yeah.
To want those opportunities. I believe that God will provide this, it will take a little bit of boldness, right? A little bit of faith. Boldness actually comes from faith. Boldness isn't recklessness. Boldness comes from this sense that maybe this conversation is happening because God is at work.
Yeah.
Maybe this is all meant to be, this encounter. And I've found again and again and again, I've been in the right place at the right time, talking to the right. And you have to trust that if God has put you in that situation, who they need, not Professor such and such, or no, it's you are the one that they need.
Yeah, that's totally right.
To hear from.
Now, you've brought up the E word. So let's just unpack that a little bit, because I think the New Testament does use that word in two different ways. There are people who are essentially gifted specifically to be evangelists. They've got a gift of evangelism and they can communicate the message, the gospel message, really well.
Yeah.
But then there's another aspect to that too, where we're all called as Christians, as you just said, to just live a life that reflects God to people as witnesses to Him. So there certainly are people who are, but that's not everybody.
And honestly, I know people who go out in the streets and just cold call, like cold contact people, and they've just got such a gift. Such a gift for that. And I mean, in some sense, I think they would want to say there's an element of what they're doing that everyone could be released in to some extent,
Well, I think
I think what we want to do today is just slightly demythologize the E word, the evangelism, and start with the immediate opportunity that's probably already there.
Before we go there, which we'll go next, I just want to speak to that where you said everyone could be released a little bit into that. I think there is also the scripture that says always be ready to give a reason for the hope that is in you. So I think there's an element where we need to understand what it is we believe in our own experience of it, not theologically what we understand, but what we understand about it in our own. Why do you have hope? It seems like the world's in such a mess and it's going to end next. It's like, but you don't. Where does that hope come from? Being able to share that. I think we need to be prepared and willing to do that if the opportunity and when the opportunity presents itself, for sure.
I think it's when the opportunity arises, but just to push back on it a little bit, because I found in a professional, secular environment, I can feel very alone and isolated in my faith. And I don't necessarily feel that glow.
That's good. We don't always feel the glow. Thanks, Carl.
It's not pouring out.
You're always good for a dark cloud.
Yeah, well,
and I don't mind a dark cloud.
Because going into, though, a professional corporate environment, it's business, it's politics, it's sitting around boardroom tables, having discussions and meetings, and it's all busy and there's pressure on people and trying to get outcomes out of people, and you're not surrounded by your Christian group. You're planted into a totally almost hostile, maybe not hostile, but dismissive of what, your own belief in God. And so it's actually hard to say, live it out of, as if it just pours out of you and you just talk about Jesus. It just feels unnatural. It's very natural, in church environment compared, and it almost feels like, it's really, really jarring. And so what I've kind of felt in terms of how do I live it myself, there might be discussions that come up that have got nothing to do with, it might be political, but instead of being the one that is hard line on a position, you can be the one that kind of just helps people talk together better, as if you can sort of rise above the conversation and show a different perspective or elements of it. You try to make it so that people aren't so hostile at each other.
So helping people build bridges rather than walls.
And so what it does is, what I've found is that places that I've worked, somehow or other, and this is probably something God's given me, where people kind of see you as having a kind of a wisdom that they don't have. And so people would talk to me about marriage problems, relationship issues. What do I think about this? Or even could be business things and so on. Because they recognize I think about things a bit different. I'm not so black and white or so stuck in my hole that I've actually see things from a different perspective. Or
so is this a context in which they know that you're a Christian?
Yes.
Yeah. Because I think even that on its own, this is what we were saying before, is that one good example can counter the 99 bad examples. And I think just them knowing that you're a Christian, but that does put a responsibility on you, because you can't just then sow equally, with everyone else into that toxic environment. You've actually got to be that point of difference.
Because you don't want to take God's name in vain now. Because now you're taking...
Which is the definition of that. You are carrying the name of Christ in a way that...
Exactly. So once you do declare, and it's out in the open that I'm a Christian, that this is where I stand, you now carry the responsibility of representing
integrity.
God in that. I don't think I've really found myself in occasional opportunities where you actually get to explain your faith and share more of this is what it actually means to me. But people know that I'm a Christian, but they also see that I've got a broader understanding, especially of things like whether it's spirituality and philosophy and broad political views and insights into things that people just, because it's just different. They just see something different. And so I'd often find myself people coming and saying, oh, I've got this issue. And it's like, and then other people say, oh, you got that issue, go and talk to me about it, because I've usually got some other ideas, which I've always just been fascinated by that. And it's not talking to them about God, but they kind of see that there's something there that they kind of trust you with that. And they kind of know that for some reason you're able to shine a different light. And so they know that I believe that. It's not doubt. I just need someone to come and correct my crazy idea that there's a God and show me the evidence for why there isn't, and then I would ditch it. Instead of having that, I've always found that people recognize and respect all of those things. And people have said, I can't believe that you're a Christian. I think that's the thing, pushing back, being able to create that one example that counters everything. You can be intelligent, analytical, thoughtful.
But you don't have to be those things. But you don't have to be those. No, and hence my example before of the woman that I talked about. It was actually beyond anything intellectual. It was actually, like what she carried into those circumstances.
But God put her in places to communicate to people who would relate to her at that level. Yeah. And he's got Connell in a situation where that's what's going to give them a sense.
Like I've just to be able to generalize it as much as we can from that, because, in the last couple of years, more people than I can ever remember coming to church in some sense out of the blue. But actually, when I dig into it, it's not completely out of the blue. When you really dig, it's because, there's a Christian in their workplace and
so our job isn't to close the deal.
Yeah, and they came to church here because they know that their friend comes here, right? Yeah. Now, I mean, in one case, their friend didn't even invite them. They just decided that, I mean, they probably could have, maybe they would have come earlier if their friend had invited them. But I've heard that again and again and again, because they've met a Christian and it was just enough light, just enough of the, as Paul says, the aroma of Christ, just enough of that to draw them. Oh, and they go to that church. Maybe we'll lean in. And
can I just share a little my experience in a similar situation? So I was in a corporate world that was actually not just neutral, but quite opposed to anything Christian. I worked at a fairly high level in this. It was a music industry business, and I didn't go in blazing that I was a Christian. I certainly didn't do that. But as time went by, I certainly didn't hide it either. As time went by, I would have people coming to me saying, what is it about you? That whole kind of, you just take a different approach to life. And it opened a door, and it wasn't a door to suddenly preach the gospel. It was just a door to say, oh, well, actually, I believe in Jesus. I'm a Christian. I think one of the principles that I've tried to adhere to is that people want to know you care before they care what you know. So the first thing is, for me, it's like people need to know that they actually matter more than me getting my pyramid scheme across. It's like I actually care about them, and that's why it is there. But then I think, as you said, Connell, that sense of I was true to my word, in this industry, that was pretty interesting. I would stand up against things that perhaps others were thinking but didn't have any value principle to say, oh, we're not going to do that. So for instance, part of what we were doing was distributing video, and the company that we worked for decided it was going to start distributing these soft porn videos, and I just refused to take those into the country. I was responsible for them to going into New Zealand or not. But I had a reason to make that stand, whereas they would be sitting there going, well, we don't really want to do that, but we don't have any kind of value base on which we would say that's not okay, but you do, and help us understand that. And I think for me, my experience has been, it's not about what I say, and I know that we need to be prepared to speak. So I'm not saying words don't matter, because I think words do matter. But it's always been in a response to someone where clearly God's opened a door. It's like, well, I know there's something different about you. What is it? And you can then, however they language that, you can then speak into that. Yeah. That's my experience.
Yeah. I think when I build relationships with people, it's never to try to create some leverage to be able to speak into their life. If I go into like that corporate environment, it is kind of like taking on a pastoral response, like bringing that into that environment, to go in and just care for people beyond just the day-to-day
and
stuff.
That's a difference. See, straight away, most people go, it's almost, sometimes your work can just be a necessary evil, but often it can be because you're building a lifestyle, you want to climb the ladder. There are a whole lot of different reasons why we're there. And it's always a mix, isn't it? But front-loading that, my top priority is people, and I want to get in there. I want to love people. And, loving people fully actually means sharing everything that you have. And it means recognizing, we've defined love as, honoring people as sacred. I think that helps, because even if there's someone at work that you don't like, even if they don't recognize it, even if they don't act accordingly, you're going to honor them as sacred. That's going to stand out. If we really love people, then we're going to care less about what they think of us and more about what they think about God.
Maybe the difference is you're not going to convert people or to change people to believe what you believe. You're using the opportunity. You're not going to work to be a pastor to people. You're going to earn money. But in that environment, to think of yourself in a sort of a pastoral role there, just to at least, these are people that God cares about, and they've got problems and difficulties in life, and they're not connected into a church, and they don't have people that can be there to help support them in different ways and navigate through their journeys in life. And if that's what you go for, and you go as a Christian, I think you've got to make it clear that's who you are. Otherwise, God doesn't really get the credit for it. You do. The point is, I'm there to be the hands of God in a way to just try to care for people and support them and speak into people's lives in ways that are helpful. That in itself creates the opportunity for God to do what he needs to do. It's not about me trying to win people over. It's just to try to sow the seeds that this is who I am and I do care. And people get to experience a little bit of that. And maybe at some point when they do want to talk about it, or when things are bad, you get invited in and you're actually able to go deeper with them.
Yeah, totally. And like making room for them to encounter Jesus for themselves, essentially creating that space. But I also wanted to say to people from, again, my experience, I remember when I actually left the industry I was talking about before, I had a conversation with a guy who owned a major music chain, and he wasn't a Christian at all, but he asked me why I was leaving, and I told him that I just felt now too compromised. Now, 7 years later, after I'd moved to Australia, that guy found me to tell me that as a result of my conversation, he started exploring Christianity, and he was now committed to a local church and completely turned his life around. Now, I didn't go in with that intent. I had no expectation of what God might do with it later through other people who obviously spoke into his life. But we've got to remember, we're not the reapers. We're the ones who are to
and you're also probably a link in a chain. This is the other thing.
Exactly.
It may not be our responsibility to take them from beginning to end.
Exactly.
We might just be a link in that chain, and I think we often are.
The last thing I want to say just about the corporate thing is, once you have made that declaration, once people do know, and it should be the case anyway, but you've got to be really mindful then that integrity becomes very important.
Yeah, that's right.
Because otherwise, if they see, well, it doesn't seem to make any difference, really, he's willing to cheat on his tax or steal that or not pay for this or whatever it might be, they go, oh, it really doesn't mean much. You need to actually stand out by having integrity.
But it's how you react to other people too.
Totally.
Like you're not joining in the toxic environment, or that's so easy to fall into.
Yeah, totally.
I still do, and I still get drawn into having bad attitudes and responding badly to people.
I was talking to someone recently who got a promotion, but the promotion meant that their job gave them less access. So that it was more money, but less access to actually interact with people. And they were quite prepared actually to have less money so that they could have a sense of purpose in their job situation. This is the kind of thinking, I think, that makes us effective instruments in the hands of God. If we're willing to front load God's purpose in that way, I think we're definitely on the right track.
I think often we think, I'll say nothing. And especially go back to my early days, trying to navigate this, is I'd say nothing. And my point of entry into the bringing God into a conversation is because I feel like I've got to stick up for God. Like you enter already
in defensive
mode, as if you've got to carry the name of God and into the workplace and sort of like stand up for, what God wants or in this situation. If you're surrounded by atheists that are quite outspoken and they'll draw you in, and then you end up coming in combatively. It's so easy to feel like you're there to win the argument and just show everyone that, you're right and they're wrong and so on. And those are really stressful environments because you kind of feel like you've got to be one up on everyone in the sense of having to be so well prepared that I've got an answer for everything that everyone's going to throw at them. Now I feel like I need to be able to have those conversations non-combatively. One of the things I do like to talk about with people is even just changing their worldview a little bit, making them think. A lot of the stuff that we've talked about, the mystery, the reality, what's the nature of reality, and getting people to think, because a lot of people aren't exposed to these ideas. And so just challenging people's worldview. But I don't feel like I need to defend God or win the arguments because you can't. There's nothing that you can bring to the table, the nail in the coffin that's going to convince everyone or answer every objection.
I actually try not to. I mean, I love a good debate, as you guys know. Yeah. I actually try not to get into it. Because if I intellectualize it, I'm actually leading people further away from that heart connection. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing too that I recognize, that I often find myself in situations where people actually need to have a conversation that really explains things to them, and I just figure, look, that's what I love, that's my thing, and God's obviously put me in the right place at the right time, but it's not what everyone needs to do. Just one thing that I'd love to get onto is what it actually means to share the gospel, because we throw that around.
Yeah, great.
Sharing the gospel with people. It's almost like I think people think there's sort of, do I need to sort of share the 4 spiritual laws and go through the script?
Yeah.
And the answer is no, because people come at faith from lots of different directions. And even the example of Paul in the book of Acts, the different angles that he comes to that with. I mean, the classic one is, in Athens, and he engages with what they believe first of all. And he engages positively finds common ground. And then he adds that. I often find myself having experiences like where I'm asking people, and really, I mean, it's not like a strategy that I have. I love talking about this stuff, right? And I often find myself then coming to this, but the difference with the Christian faith, and I had a conversation like this recently where we're talking about these ideas and God and the presence of God. And for me, this brings me to the core difference of the Christian faith is this idea that this is a God that comes to us, that absorbs all of our evil and gives forgiveness, and how transformative that is, and how transformative that has been for me, that this isn't just something out there. And so what I would say is a very big part is actually your testimony. We're going to come back to us being witnesses. We're not out there as professors of ideas. We're out there as witnesses with a testimony of what Christ has done in our lives. So I would say, tell your story, share your experience. And invariably, if God's put you in that place at your time, there'll be something in your story that's going to lead them the next step. You don't have to lead them all 100 steps.
Don't close the deal. You don't have to close the deal.
Yeah, that's right. So just start letting your story. This is the thing about being open. And I think it is important for us to understand. And I mean, this is why, I love talking about Jesus in our church context in ways that equip people. I try to leave out the lingo and the cliches and try to explain this in ways that people can take that. And, just simple ways of explaining the core part of what God has done in Jesus Christ.
But that can be secondary to what God's done for you. That comes later, perhaps. Like, we don't start there, do we?
Well, it's theologically central, but yes. Of course, you don't have to front load that.
No, that's right.
It's part of the explanation.
Yes.
And this is what you see Paul doing this, right? He's engaging with, often he's doing things in their midst that's like, gee, we've never seen anything like this before.
Yes.
And then the explanation comes later, right?
Yeah.
It was only right at the end of his talk to the Athenians that he even mentions Jesus,
yes.
right?
Yes. And he's breaking down, through that talk, he's essentially breaking down walls because he's saying, hey, you're right about that. I'm not sure I agree with you about this, but it's like this whole process of just getting to the point where you can have the conversation,
Yeah, and essentially what we're bearing witness to is an intimate relationship with God that is enabled because God is a God that comes to us. He embraces us. We don't get there by thinking about it. I mean, this is often something I find myself saying. It's like you're not going to be able to think because coincidentally, I often find myself talking to just chronic overthinkers. so it's just amazing. This is where I just so believe in the sovereignty of God in these things, and we've talked about God's sovereignty before, and to connect that topic to this, I find myself in these situations and I think this is so rigged. God has put these people in my path, and obviously the fit between who I am and who they are, it just works. And I think this is where I feel like this is the core to my boldness, because I actually can be a little bit of a socially shy person, and that's hard to believe, but I am. And I find that boldness that it takes to actually come out of my shell a bit. I mean, it's one thing to do it up front in a Christian church,
but one-on-one.
Actually, it's that trust in the fact that God's already at work here. It's
great.
I'm just going to trust the fact that God's already at work here, and I'm going to step into this, and I'm just going to start conversation. Honestly, I've just had so many amazing encounters that actually now I'm more aware of that, because now I expect that to happen. You don't tend to see what you don't expect, and so expect that to happen, and I think you'll see, the opportunity. I mean, I pray for it. As well.
Yes.
God, Lord, give me opportunities.
Yep.
It's been a long time since I talked to anyone about my faith. Lord, give me opportunity.
That's great.
And then be on the lookout, and then just move into it inductively. Just be, be open. You don't have to push things. You don't have to be artificial. Just be yourself and be open and see where it goes. And you will be equipped. I think there are ways that we can equip ourselves. And of course, understanding what we believe in the Bible. If we're really serious about being used by God, let's equip ourselves. Let's do that. I know people that will always have resources on them, something that they can give to someone. I'm finding lately, again, this is experimental, but one of the things that people will engage with, we've just produced this resource, Stu, The Life and Words of Jesus. And that's actually off the back of a bit of experimentation in a church context of what will people actually take away and actually read. And so we created this resource that's basically a compilation. It's like the highlights of the 4 Gospels. And essentially what we're saying is read this for yourself. You don't have to listen to what I'm saying, but for one time in your life, read the words that change the world. And we've found actually that people will take that away and read that. It's actually something that I've seen people more willingly take away and engage with than any other resource that I've used. So, have a couple of those in your glove box.
Or have something at least.
Yeah.
Just before you wrap up, I think we probably need to wrap up. A couple of things I just want to say to our listeners. If you're listening to this podcast and perhaps to our Thrive Deeper podcast, you're doing exactly what Matt just said. Make sure you are informing yourself of what you believe and why you believe and what the word says. So be encouraged in that.
This is a great promotion for Thrive.
It is, isn't it?
None of which, by the way, we make any money out of. This is all serving the kingdom. But
as we came into this, I thought, well, what are the 6 things that I've discovered that might help people? And then, Matt, maybe you can close out this episode. But I put, be curious about people, listen more than talk.
Love it.
When you're meeting people, be curious about them, find out a bit about them. Be honest about your own story, even the messy parts. People don't want to hear that you're perfect. They want to hear that you had the same struggles or similar struggles or some struggles at least. So be honest about your own story, even the messy parts. Use normal language. No Christian jargon. Don't use words that you then have to spend the next 10 minutes explaining. Just try to use normal language. Look for moments of openness. Don't force it. So just if the opportunity comes, but don't feel like you've got to close the deal. Don't feel like you've got to get to a certain point to tick the box. And a big one for me, I think, is trust the Spirit. You're not alone in the conversation. The Holy Spirit will prompt you if you trust in him and believe that he's there with you and prompting you. And the last thing I had was just practice gentleness. People aren't projects. As you said, Connell, we should never be entering a relationship and seeing that person as a project to get them from here to here and then looking for the next person. We need to genuinely care about people. And so don't see them as your project.
And I'm going to finish by adding one more to that, Stu, and it is pray for those around you. Pray for your friends. Pray for your colleagues. Pray for opportunities. Pray that God would equip you, give you boldness, give you wisdom. James says, if you lack wisdom, ask God. I've heard wisdom from the least educated people, like hearing amazing things come out of their mouth because of their experience of transformation with God. because of what God has equipped them with. So pray for all of these things. Pray the way forwards. Prison doors open through prayer. The way opens through prayer. So pray and then act accordingly.
Hi listeners, just before we close this episode of Thrive Perspectives, Matt mentioned a new resource we've developed called The Life and Words of Jesus. In The Life and Words of Jesus, we explore the profound historical impact of Jesus, his teachings, his life, and the enduring ripple effects that reach into our present. Now, this isn't just a collection of opinions, it's a journey through the words of Jesus himself and those who walked alongside him. This is a great resource to have a couple of copies on hand when you're having those conversations, and you can just allow Scripture and the words of Jesus to speak for themselves. If you'd like to find out more about this or purchase some copies, the best place to go is our website, thrivetoday.tv. That's thrivetoday, one word, .tv. At the top of the homepage, you'll see we've put a link with more information and an opportunity for you to purchase copies if you would like to.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Thrive Perspectives. Our hope is that these discussions will challenge you to look at life from a new perspective. You'll find all our resources at the Thrive Today website, thrivetoday.tv.